Hey, John Gilroy here. When it comes to software development, AI systems create vulnerabilities 45% of the time, exactly matching the human error rate. Today, let's talk about Secure by Design. Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, the podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I'll be your moderator. In the virtual studio today is world-famous Chris Wysopal, Chief Security Evangelist from Veracode. Chris, how are you?
Hi, John. I'm doing great.
Hey, I met you in D.C. at an event, the Billington event, and I thought he was just a regular guy. Then I did the research on you and said, wait a minute, this guy he's like Forrest Gump. Wait a minute, he was here.
Yeah, I've been around for a long time.
Yeah, and
can't get rid of me.
And hitting all the right mountaintops here. It's pretty good. Speaking of Billington, 3-day event, all kinds of people there. We had a lot of fun, learned a lot of things. I guess summarize it in a sentence or something. Talks a lot about AI and vulnerability in the landscape here. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. And we're going to use some fun facts like I started off with and talk in general about security and so why some people may put their feet up on the couch and just let AI do the coding for them and bad things happen when you try to do things. So let's talk about Billington, your thoughts, and move on from there.
Yeah, I did moderate a panel, and it was on AI and its impact on cybersecurity. And, you know, I think we talked about some of the things which people just all know about, like it just enhances attackers' ability to do all the things that they already do. That's what automation is. Automate your phishing attacks, make them look better, automate every kind of social engineering attack, automate penetration, trying to attack systems. So, you know, there's that aspect of it. And that's sort of the initial reaction to AI impacting cybersecurity. But then when you think a little bit deeper, a lot of what the panel started to talk about was, hey, wait a minute, we're building all these AI-enabled apps. We're building agents. We're building chatbots into our websites. We're by taking advantage of AI, we're actually adding risk. And that's sort of the other side of the equation. Like, we're helping attackers by making a bigger attack surface and enabling new types of attacks like prompt injection, which didn't really exist before. So I think we're still learning about how AI is impacting security, but it was a great panel to sort of bring some of the newer thinking to light and get off of some of the older, it's going to help attackers just write malware faster.
It was a standing room only. And there were people lined up to ask questions. And I thought you guys were like rock and roll stars or baseball players or something. There's like lines to talk. And
I was surprised on how excited people were for the panel. I mean, everyone is really looking for how is AI impacting my job as a CISO or as a security leader in my organization.
And they look at you and say, hey, this Chris has been around. He's been beat up and knocked around, and well, he's got some insight here, and so it's valuable. And I started off with a valuable study from your company, and it's called the 2025 Gen AI Code Security Report. That's where I got that fancy 45% figure. So why? I mean, so why'd you put it together, and what kind of conclusions does it have?
Yeah, so I spoke at Black Hat in 2024 and gave a presentation looking at academic research on these different AI coding agents. Obviously Copilot from GitLab, and people just using things like OpenAI, ChatGPT to do their coding. So like this was like 2.5 years ago, the very beginnings of using these tools. And there was several academic studies out there that said, basically it generates code as bad as a human does. In some cases, a little bit worse. And it's funny in our fields when you say like, someone does a job like carpentry as bad as a human does. Humans are actually pretty good at carpentry, right? They're not so good at writing code. We need a process to make sure we're doing security testing and remediating, because we know we're just always going to be making these security mistakes. So when I say it's as bad as humans writing code, it's introducing vulnerabilities as it's writing the code. And so fast forward to just earlier this year, and we said, LLMs have gotten better, right? We all know they're getting better. they're scoring higher on, passing the bar exam or all these other standardized tests. Let's see if they've gotten better at writing code. And so we decided to do our own study, and we looked at 100 different LLMs that span 2 years. So we went back and used those, 2023 LLMs all the way up to 2025 LLMs. We used big ones, small ones, the big standard ones you always think of, like ChatGPT, and then some smaller ones that are just designed just for coding, because we want to really get the landscape. And it turns out that 45% of the time they introduce a vulnerability when they're asked to do a code completion task, which isn't even vibe coding. That's just the basic thing, like saying, I need to query the database for the user's profile, write code to act, here's the username variable, write code to pull up their profile and bring it into the application from the database. You give it a command like that and you say, does it do it without a vulnerability? And we found out that on average, across all the different languages we looked at and all the different vulnerabilities, 45% of the time it introduces a vulnerability into that request. So we want to make sure people understood that there's a big risk to using these tools. We still want people to use them. Like, you need them to be competitive, just like, DevOps makes you go faster. It makes security testing harder. We're not saying don't do DevOps, right? We're likewise not saying don't use these coding assistants, but use them understanding the risks and mitigate the risks with the process.
My wife's a Latin teacher, so I get
Yeah.
to use fancy words. So I'm going to impress you with a fancy word here.
Okay.
Iconoclast. I mean, this opinion is an iconoclast. Plus, I mean, it's not a popular position. And you pick up your phone headlines laying off people because AI is taking over this. This is going to happen. That's going to happen. Big percentage increase, but I think this position is interesting because it's really showing that the emperor has no clothes. It's like, no, hey guys, remove the shades from your eyes and take a look what's going on here. The reality is that there's more problems than you realize.
Yeah, and one of the things that we also looked at in the study was, people are saying they're getting better at coding, right? They're writing better code. Right. So we wanted to also validate that. Like, why are people saying that if we're seeing that the vulnerabilities it was actually flat over the 2 years? That 45% number was flat over 2 years. So all those changes that we've seen happen with LLMs, the vulnerability hasn't changed. But people still say they're writing better code. Like, if you surveyed someone who's been using them for 2 years, they would say that. So one of the things we did was we actually looked at the quality of the code from a syntax point of view, right? Like, you have to write correct syntax code or it won't compile or it won't run. Like, this is the basics of writing code. And that actually did get much better. 2 years ago, it wrote code that didn't have correct syntax, that needed to be corrected by the developer a little less than 50% of the time. And if you fast forward to the last ones we tested for the 2025 LLMs, they were getting the syntax right 95% of the time. So they improved on this dimension of writing code. They improved on syntax. And I believe that is one of the reasons developers are like, hey, these tools are getting better. I'm not having to fix as much when it comes out of the Copilot. It's making nice, clean, pretty code. So that makes this even harder to deliver the security aspect of this, even harder to deliver to developers and developer managers, because their feeling is these tools are getting better and they're really good right now. And we have to show them the data and say, not from a security perspective. So it is a pretty unpopular position, but anyone in security talking to developers is unpopular. Like, very early on, when I went to developer conferences and people were talking about all the cool new things they were building, all the cool new technologies that were available to them, like cloud, like, this is great. I can spin up all this infrastructure. I can use all these services. I don't have to write as much code. And I would get up at that cloud conference and say, yeah, but now you have all this new attack surface that you don't know how to secure. So you have to understand how to use that API securely. Now you need to make sure that when you spin up that machine, it's securely configured. And it's like, oh man, you're raining on our parade. We were talking about all these huge productivity gains, and you're basically telling me that there's all this work I have to do alongside that, so the productivity gains aren't as high as I thought they would be. So, I guess that's a nice way of saying it, but really, they're like, we don't. You're a bummer, man. We don't want to hear from the security guy, right? We just want to be in our happy ignorance of these problems, and let someone else deal with them later, right? I mean, you in your beginning, you said we're going to talk about secure by design, but like the idea that you would build your thing as quickly, as easily as possible and let someone else deal with the security later, right? Let the security team do a pen test. Let them tell me the bare minimum security I need to do. Maybe we'll deal with it later. That's like the opposite of secure by design. And so when we talk about secure by design, we're often being a bummer, right? Because we're like, you got to start on day one. You got to start writing the code securely and start testing the code securely, and that's just not as fun for the developers.
I will put a link in the show notes to this Gen AI code security report because I think it's important for people to download and they can either get surprised or shocked. But I think there's a phrase in the business, and you've heard it. It's baked in. Ronco software. No, its security is baked in, and there's the phrase that's used. But is that just a misleading statement? Is that secure by design, or is that just misleading people?
Yeah. So, are you talking about using these coding assistants?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of different companies use a lot of terms as far as that, and that's what they'll claim, and then iconoclasts like you will go, well, looky here, it's not.
So, when you talk about security, it is nice to have independent security view and independent recommendations, right? You don't always want to get all your security knowledge from the vendor because the vendor obviously wants you to think everything is great and everything is secure, and they actually might be a little misleading about it, how great and secure their product, their service is. And so it's always good in security to have some independence from the vendor consumer relationship and have a third party in there. And so that's one of the things that we recommend is if you're using a coding assistant from a particular vendor, don't rely on that vendor to also tell you whether the code it's generated is secure or not. Have it independent. So use a different LLM to do that, or use traditional testing to do that. And so that way you don't have to always just be, trusting the vendor. Absolutely. You can trust, but verify, right? Which is what we like to say. So that's important in security is verification. So the tools are going to probably get better at writing secure code and also looking for secure code. But also the people that do this independently, like Veracode, we're focusing on getting better at finding vulnerabilities using AI on top of our traditional methods. We are also building tools that can remediate vulnerabilities based on tell us where the vulnerability is. We'll give you a fix, and we'll validate that the fix is secure. So people are going to be trying all kinds of different coding tools. I've seen development teams switch from Copilot to Claude Code to people just using things like DeepSeek. And it's nice to have a process, which is a control, which is no matter which one I'm using, I'm still testing the quality of that code, and I'm able to remediate that code in an automated way, which is a very important part of using these coding assistants because you're going to be going faster, right? You're going to be going faster. You're going to be writing more code per unit of time, right? They give you productivity benefits, right? But if you think about it, if that productivity benefit on writing code still has the same vulnerability density, it still creates a vulnerability 45% of the time it's asked to do a code completion task. Maybe you doing that code completion task would take, an hour and the AI takes a minute. But if they have the same vulnerability density, it means you have more vulnerabilities to fix per unit of time. No one is going to do this manually. No one is going to auto-generate code with an AI and then fix the stuff manually, right? So we need generative AI to be used for code remediation. And for me, that is the real exciting part of how AI is going to impact security, is we're going to be able to remediate things faster. And also, like, the AI will know how to do it. A lot of times developers will get a finding, say it's cross-site scripting, and they'll get some example of on this line, you need to fix it this way. And they have to go and they have to learn a little bit about what's cross-site scripting. Why am I fixing this? What is the impact of this? Why am I even doing this? How do I do it right? The AI doesn't need to do that learning. It already knows that. So I'm pretty bullish that that AI injected into software development is going to have a net benefit because we're going to lean on this remediation, and we're going to be able to fix all the vulnerabilities created by the coding assistants and also from the humans.
Yeah. Well, this is the Federal Tech Podcast, and you can listen to this interview there if you want. And my federal listeners use the word called compliance.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Now, wait a minute, Chris. I mean, this code, Ronco code, is compliant, so I'm going to use it. It's fine, right? Well, I mean, it's almost reassuring. Oh, you can step out on that pond, Chris. The ice is fine. The tool says it's fine. So I think you get lulled into, and I think that's what AI does. Is that it's just you drop your guard.
Yeah, and so we can't, like, when you talk about compliance, you can't like not have evidence generation, right? Like you have to have artifacts that you did the testing on this code before it went into production, had this level of testing, these types of testing. This is what it was found. This is what was decided needed to be remediated. And you need the evidence of all of those things to be compliant. So you really need a platform that is designed to generate these reports as easily as possible. And one of the buzzwords, in especially in federal compliance today is continuous ATO, right? Continuous assurance. So every build you push to production, you want to have that compliance documentation of this was the testing that was done. This is what was found. This is what was fixed. This is what was retested. This was the residual risk that we pushed into production. We decided it was okay to accept that risk, right? And this has got to be put in an automated way in the right platforms so that it is not overly burdensome, right? I think all of this stuff can be automated. We can, like, the Veracode solution can generate the right documentation, and we have the right integrations to put that information where it needs to get, so you can have that continuous ATO.
Chris, I spent about 13 years in the classroom and learned a lot. And what I did learn was that people hate to write. I mean, most people got to take, get your arm and twist the arm and, put it and throw stuff at them. And before they'll come up with it, it's hard to do. And I think automation, I always think of automation as something mechanical, but if a report can be automated and include valid information, all of a sudden it's going to be much easier for a person who's doing 10 things to do that, because they're going to wait till the end of the day, or they're going to do it quick, and it's not going to be. And I've seen some humans put together words that, not good. So I think that's a value in and of itself.
No, absolutely. And, when you automate things, you help get rid of mistakes. You make things more standardized. People change roles. And it's still doing the same thing. So having those automated reports in the platform that we're delivering, and then you go and you integrate it to where you need it to go, just has so many benefits. And when one of the big challenges of doing this is when you have a lot of disparate tools that each do their own thing. They each have their own templates. They each have their own integration, and they each, a lot of times they use different terms for different things, like high, medium, low versus critical and very high and medium, and like having that all normalized so your reporting is of your different testing technologies like static analysis, dynamic analysis, supply chain security. All of these things normalized into the same language, the same scoring system, the same integration, really, really, really helps a lot. And that's one of the things we've really worked on with our FedRAMP platform, is to make sure that everything is normalized and everything you can get it on any of the data in an automated way. One thing to look out for, and you often see this with other FedRAMP solutions, is they'll say they're a company that does software composition analysis well. So that will be FedRAMP enabled on their platform. That'll have great reporting. And then like the static analysis is the poor stepchild. So everything has to be equivalent and using all the same standards and APIs because we are using so many different tools. You want those to all be coming through the same reporting platform.
You mentioned the fact that you're improving and AI is improving back and forth. I think of if I can use a fancy word like iconoclast, I can use a regular word like whack-a-mole. And so I see Chris is in his room. He's got a little hammer there. And he goes, whoop! Oh, over there. Oh, he's over there. And then over there, and you have your whole team. And it's just so what is going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years? Is this going to be constant whack-a-mole? And at the end of the day, everyone's arms are sore, or where's going to end?
So one help with that is thinking things from a risk perspective, having some sort of centralized risk manager. I think we're starting to use AI to help determine the real risk of a vulnerability. So it isn't just a long list of vulnerabilities that are all sort of, we don't know the risk of each one, so we need to fix each one, right? If you take a risk-based approach and you take in signals from production, is this internet facing? What kind of sensitive business data does this have access to? Is it customer data? Is it internal data? You can start to make risk-based decisions, and maybe you don't have to whack some of the moles, right? It focuses you on the most important things. And I think we are going to always have some sort of whack-a-mole because we're always going to be using a new tool, a new technology. Someone's not going to have all the right testing and compliance in place before they deploy their first deploy. There's always going to be these problems. But if you have some sort of a centralized risk manager where you can prioritize things based on risk, then hopefully you can make more sense and that the time you're allocating to whack moles, you're whacking the right ones.
And so that's where Veracode fits with our federal marketplace, is that they'll be able to accelerate ability to report and also reduce vulnerabilities. And I think this is a prudent approach or a realistic approach, because people get sucked into the speed and the numbers and this number 45%. When I first read it, I went, what? That's like my advanced math. That's like half. So half of the stuff's coming out there. A half, really?
It was actually pretty shocking, and that 45% is the average of across all 4 different languages, and some of the languages were it would get it right. Let's do it wrong, get it wrong, because we have our 45% of the time getting it wrong as the average. Java would get it wrong like 72% of the time. And more modern languages like JavaScript and Python would get it wrong like 28% of the time.
Yeah.
So which is still unacceptable, right? Like 28% of the time is creating a vulnerability for a code completion task is still a lot. It just means like you have 10 vulnerabilities to fix at the end of the day instead of 30. Right?
I was thinking of going to the dentist, and I got this piece of paper on the wall. I'll get about 28% of the time I'll miss, but I don't want to.
Right. We're going to miss 20% of your cavities.
But we'll get a lot of them.
So obviously, even 20% of the time is poor, but. I encourage people to share that report with their development teams, because you probably have more of a security-minded audience here. Show that report with your engineering managers. And this way, when they are thinking, you know what, we don't really need to do all this testing because we're using AI-generated code, especially if they're using Java, they better be doing it.
Yeah, I think that's the case. Well, that was a very, very insightful interview. I'll put the link to that secure report in the show notes. And we're running out of time here, unfortunately, Chris. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my world-famous guest, Chris Wysopal. He is with a company called Veracode, Veracode. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks a lot, John.